Have you ever felt an unexplained stillness after the storm? A deep silence, not outside but within, not peace, not relief, but a strange emptiness. That's not a sign of failure. That's the beginning of something sacred. Carl Jung believed that silence is not the end of healing. It's the doorway to something much greater, the awakening of the self. But what exactly is this self? And why does it call to us only after we've touched our deepest wounds? In this video, we're going to explore a truth no one tells you about inner healing, the moment when your old identity begins to crumble and a new one hasn't yet taken form. Why silence, confusion, and disconnection are not signs of being lost, but signs that you're finally coming home. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you'll understand what Jung called the return to the self, and why it may be the most powerful transformation you'll ever experience. There comes a moment on every deep healing journey when the noise stops. No more frantic searching, no more crying out for answers, just a strange, vast silence, and at first, it's terrifying. You've done the work. You've revisited your childhood wounds. You've faced the shadows. You've let go of the stories that once defined you. And now you're here. But here feels empty. You're not broken. You're not regressing. What you're feeling is the space before rebirth, a space Carl Jung described as the beginning of individuation, when the self begins to awaken after the ego has stepped aside. It's the quiet after the unraveling, where the old version of you has dissolved, but the new hasn't yet arrived. In today's video, we're going to dive deep into that sacred threshold, the space between who you were and who you're becoming. You'll understand why this silence isn't a sign that something's wrong. It's a sign that something real is finally beginning. And if you've ever felt like your healing journey is incomplete, like you're missing a piece that no one is talking about, I've created something special to support you. In the eBook pinned in the comments, you'll find deeper tools, powerful insights, and guided reflections that go far beyond what we can explore here. It's not just a book. It's a mirror for your soul, a guide back to your truth. And if you feel connected to this message, make sure to subscribe and stay close. This space is for those who are no longer satisfied with surface answers. This is for those who are ready to meet themselves fully. Now, take a breath. Let's begin. There's a strange kind of silence that enters your life. Not loud, not violent, but heavy. A silence that doesn't just fill the room, it fills you. The world keeps moving outside. The routines continue. The meetings, the obligations, the relationships. But inside, something has gone quiet. What used to inspire you now feels empty. The dreams that once lit up your heart seem dim, distant. You're functioning, but you're not alive. You're present, but not connected. And no matter how much you try to distract yourself with productivity, motivation, or even self-help strategies, the silence deepens. That silence is not a void. It's a voice that doesn't scream. It whispers and it says, "This is no longer you." Carl Jung didn't see this state as depression, laziness, or failure. He recognized it as something sacred, a turning point, a psychic transition. The beginning of a deep process where the self, the most authentic, whole, and alive part of your being, begins to call you home. But what is the self? To Jung, the self is not the ego. The ego is your conscious identity, who you think you are, who you present to the world, who you've constructed based on expectations and experiences. But the self is your totality, your truth, your shadow, your light, your potential, your essence. It's the soul beneath the mask, and when the self starts to stir, everything that isn't real in you begins to fall apart. This is why the process feels like loss. You're not just shedding habits, you're shedding an entire identity. You feel disoriented, not because you're lost, but because you're no longer willing to pretend. And the people around you might not understand. Even you might not understand. Why are you pulling away? Why does everything feel meaningless? Why are you suddenly craving solitude, silence, space? Because the self doesn't awaken in noise, it awakens in emptiness. And this is the part most people misinterpret. They panic. They try to go back to who they were, back to the busyness, the striving, the roles, the personas. But once the self begins to emerge, returning to your old identity becomes impossible. You can try, but it won't fit anymore. The job that once defined you will start to feel suffocating. The relationships you once clung to will begin to feel shallow. Even your own thoughts will sound foreign, as if someone else is narrating a life that's no longer yours. This is the sacred death of the ego. It's not the end, it's the beginning. But first, the false has to die. And death, even symbolic death, is terrifying, because we were never taught to let go. We were taught to hold on, to be consistent, to follow through, to be who we said we were yesterday. But healing isn't about becoming a better version of your old self. It's about surrendering to the truth of who you really are. A truth that might not make sense to your ego, but feels unmistakably right to your soul. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming whole. Not perfect, not impressive, whole. And individuation begins not with clarity, but with confusion. Not with action, but with pause. Not with answers, but with deep, aching questions like, why am I here? Who am I really when no one is watching? What am I pretending to love, just to belong? These questions aren't problems, they're invitations. They mark the moment the self knocks on the door, waiting for you to stop everything and listen. But the self doesn't arrive with a plan. It arrives with disruption, with endings, with silence. You might feel like you're breaking down, but what's really breaking is the cage. Jung said, you are not what has happened to you, you are what you choose to become. But you can't choose until you see clearly. And you can't see clearly until the illusion falls away. That's the role of this silence. It isn't here to punish you, it's here to free you, and that freedom begins in the moment you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what truth inside me am I no longer willing to betray? Because the truth is, you've been betraying yourself in small ways for years. You smiled when you wanted to cry. You agreed when you wanted to scream. You stayed when every part of you wanted to leave. You pushed through when your soul begged for stillness. And now the silence isn't just a phase, it's a portal, a space where the self waits, not to shame you, but to meet you. It says, you don't need to keep pretending. You don't need to keep striving. You don't need to carry what no longer serves you. But you do need to let go of who you thought you had to be, of the identity you built to survive, of the mask that kept you safe, but also kept you small. This is the awakening of the self, and it never begins with fireworks. It begins with stillness, with discomfort, with a whisper. So if you're here, feeling the weight of that silence, you're not lost. You're being called. The moment you start listening to the silence inside you, the world outside begins to shift. Not because reality has changed, but because your relationship with it has. You no longer find comfort in the things that once distracted you. You no longer find meaning in the roles you used to play. Even the people who once felt like home may now feel distant, as if life itself is slowly pulling you away from everything that kept you from yourself. But this isn't rejection. It's redirection. It's the self preparing you for a rebirth. The transition, however, is anything but easy. In fact, Jung often spoke of it as a kind of psychic death, a symbolic collapse of everything the ego built to survive. And when the ego starts losing control, it reacts with fear, confusion, even resistance. You'll feel it. Suddenly, the things you used to enjoy feel meaningless. You may wake up and feel like you're watching your life from the outside. You go through the motions, but something in you has checked out. This is not laziness. It's not depression. It's the threshold. It's what mystics called the dark night of the soul, a period of emptiness, detachment, and disorientation. But Jung knew this emptiness wasn't an ending. It was a sacred clearing, a necessary dismantling to make space for a more authentic self to rise. But the ego doesn't go quietly. It clings, it negotiates, it tries to resurrect the old life through busyness, numbing, or denial. And the more you resist the call, the louder the discomfort becomes. This is how the self speaks. Not through words, but through symbols. And if you're paying attention, you'll start to notice the signs, dreams that feel more vivid than reality, of death, of birth, of traveling alone, of being lost and found again. Coincidences that don't feel random, books, songs, strangers echoing the very questions you've been asking in silence. No sudden urge to be alone, to pull away from noise, to retreat, not to isolate, but to reorganize. You may even feel physical symptoms, a tightness in the chest, fatigue that no sleep can fix, or an ache that feels more emotional than physical. This is not failure. It's initiation. It's your soul speaking in a language your ego cannot understand. Because this journey was never meant to be logical. It's meant to be lived. And here's the paradox. The more you resist, the more painful it becomes. But the moment you surrender, the moment you stop trying to hold everything together, something else takes over, a deeper current, a quiet knowing, a whisper that says, let it fall apart. Because only in that falling apart can the self rise. You see, the ego fears change because it believes it will die, but the self doesn't want to kill the ego. It wants to integrate it, to invite it into a new relationship, where the ego, no, longer leads through fear but serves the soul. This is the true work of transformation, not to destroy the parts of you that helped you survive, but to reassign them, to thank them and release them, to create space for truth to take their place. So what does this look like in practice? It looks like choosing silence over noise, presence over performance, rest over productivity. It means asking, what in me is trying to die so something deeper can be born? It means honoring the longing you've kept buried for years, the dreams you told yourself were impossible, the voice that whispers even now, you were made for more than this. Jung taught that we are not here to become someone else. We are here to remember who we've always been, but remembering takes courage, because it means facing everything we've used to forget, our patterns, our personas, our past. It means looking in the mirror and saying, I forgive the version of me that had to fake her smile to feel loved. I honor the part of me that stayed silent just to keep the peace. I bless the younger me who thought she had to be everything to everyone just to feel worthy. And then you begin to walk differently. You no longer chase healing like it's a race. You no longer seek permission to rest. You no longer abandon yourself just to be accepted because you realize something profound. The pain wasn't the problem. The denial of it was. Your exhaustion wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. Your sensitivity wasn't fragility. It was your soul asking to be seen. Your confusion wasn't a flaw. It was the space between what was and what's about to be. So let yourself pause. Let yourself unravel. Let yourself question everything. Because what feels like falling apart is often just falling into place. This is not the end of you. It's the beginning of who you really are. And when you finally stop running from the silence, you'll realize it was never empty. It was your truth, waiting to be heard. After the collapse comes the rebuilding. But this time the foundation is different. It's not built on expectations. It's not shaped by survival. It's not designed for approval. It's constructed from within, with truth, with clarity, with presence. Carl Jung called this stage the process of individuation, a journey not toward perfection, but toward wholeness, a becoming that includes everything you are and everything you've disowned, because the path to the self doesn't require you to abandon who you've been. It asks you to gather all the pieces, the strong ones, the broken ones, the proud parts, the ashamed ones, the light and the shadow. You don't become whole by polishing your personality. You become whole by inviting back the parts of you that have lived in silence. This is where the real work begins, and it's not glamorous. It looks like sitting in stillness when your mind is screaming for distraction. It looks like having compassion for the part of you that lashes out when it feels unsafe. It looks like choosing not to betray yourself in relationships that only survive if you shrink. True transformation is rarely loud. It's not always visible, but it is deeply, undeniably felt. And this is where your relationship with the ego begins. To change, you no longer try to destroy it. You learn to understand it. You start to notice when it speaks from fear. Don't say that. They might not like you. Or from shame. You should have known better. Or from unworthiness. Who are you to want more? But now, instead of believing it, you observe it. You speak gently to it. You remind it that it no longer has to carry the burden of pretending, to have it all together. You begin leading with yourself, that quiet, grounded center that doesn't need to prove anything, that doesn't chase recognition, that isn't attached to the story of who you were supposed to be. This part of you, yourself, isn't interested in image. It's interested in integrity, and it guides you in unexpected ways, not through plans and logic, but through intuition, through subtle impulses, through resonance. You begin choosing differently. Instead of pleasing everyone, you protect your peace. Instead of over-explaining, you let silence speak. Instead of running from discomfort, you sit with it until it softens. This is how you begin living from alignment, not by changing your outer life first, but by changing the energy you bring to it. You stop being reactive and start becoming reflective. You pause before you respond. You breathe before you speak. You ask, is this coming from my conditioning or from my clarity? And in that pause, everything shifts, because now you are choosing. Not performing, not repeating, choosing. And yes, this path is vulnerable, but it's also powerful, because the more you align with yourself, the less you need external validation. And that is freedom. Freedom from the opinions of others. Freedom from the roles that once defined you. Freedom from the idea that you need to be anyone other than who you already are. But here's the truth many avoid. This freedom comes with loss. You will lose old identities, old dreams, old relationships that were only ever built on your willingness to abandon yourself. But you will also gain something sacred. You will gain inner peace that doesn't depend on perfect circumstances. You will gain a voice that speaks with authenticity, not apology. You will gain a life that feels like home, because it finally fits who you are. And slowly you begin to understand what Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not just in theory, but in your body, in your choices, in how you walk through the world. This is not a destination, this is a practice, and it asks for your presence every day. When you're tempted to betray your truth, pause. When you feel yourself shrinking to fit someone's comfort, pause. When your old patterns beg you to abandon yourself, pause. And remember, you've already come through the fire. You've already stood at the edge of collapse and chosen to rebuild. You've already listened to the silence and let it speak. Now, you are becoming the one who walks with it, not in fear, but in fullness. This is the heart of individuation, to know yourself deeply, to hold yourself compassionately, to express yourself courageously, and to live from the center of your being no matter how loud the world becomes. So if you've been wondering where to begin here, with the breath, with the choice, with the moment in front of you. Because this moment is not empty, it's sacred. It's where the ego bows and the self begins to lead. Some transformations are so quiet the world doesn't notice. There's no applause, no visible proof, just a softness in the eyes, a steadiness in the breath, a calm in the presence of chaos, and yet something has changed. You no longer belong to the noise. You no longer chase what never felt real. You no longer abandon yourself to feel safe, because you finally remembered who you are. Not the mask, not the story, not the version others taught you to be. You are the one who stayed, the one who kept listening, the one who walked through the silence and didn't turn back. This is not the end. This is your beginning. A life led not by fear, but by truth. Not by habit, but by consciousness. Not by performance, but by presence. And if something in this message stirred your soul, if a quiet part of you whispered, "This is what I've been needing," then honor that voice. Don't silence it again. Don't walk away like nothing happened, because you didn't come this far just to stay the same. If you feel ready to go deeper, to truly understand what's been blocking your peace, to reconnect with the self that's been waiting beneath the noise, then I invite you to check out the ebook we've placed in the pinned comment. It's not just a book, it's a mirror, a companion for this exact moment in your life, with insights, guidance, and powerful truths that will walk beside you as you step into your next chapter. Sometimes all it takes is one honest word, one sacred pause, one deeper truth to change the way you see everything. You're not broken, you're blooming. And now, you know the way back to yourself. We're here walking it with you. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because this journey doesn't end here. And let me know in the comments, what part of you is finally ready to be seen? Your voice matters. Your healing matters. You matter. We'll see you in the next video.